It's MADO MONOGATARI Fia and the Wondrous Academy. I really had no idea what to expect of this game. This is the limited edition for the Switch. Thank you very much to Idea Factory North America for sending it over. I've been playing the game this week on my PlayStation 5, and I found out that it's, how best to describe it, a slice of life of kids in a magical academy. Yep, we've never had that before. Well, we certainly haven't had it quite like this. It's bright, breezy, and very light-hearted. I have quite a few gameplay sections I want to show you, which I will intersperse while unboxing. And we'll start off straight away with the first one, introducing the game, its background, its vibe, while I wrestle with the cellophane. Okay. MADO Monogatari is a Japanese RPG series of dungeon crawlers originally created by Compile during the 1980s and 90s. The series stayed in Japan, but it became better known because it spawned the popular Puyo puzzle games. The blueprint for the MADO Monogatari games is a young mage in training, and you follow their adventures in a world filled with colourful characters and monsters, including a fish with human arms, one of quite a few characters, I believe, who made the jump from the older games to this new one. It's really the first MADO Monogatari game we've officially got in the West. There was one sort of back in 2013. It came out for the PS Vita and later for PC, and that was the Sorcery Saga Curse of the Great Curry God. Please note the importance of curry. You will come across that in this game as well, and a new sidekick similar to Ku. So let's have a look at Fia and the Wondrous Academy, developed by Sting for Compile Heart in Japan and published in the West by Idea Factory. Many thanks to Idea Factory for a PS5 review code, and I'm able to show you game footage of the first 3 chapters, avoiding possible spoilers from later on. There are 3 difficulty settings. I chose the default normal for most of my playthrough. I tested easy and hard as well, and will comment on that in my combat coverage.
古代魔導学校正しき魔導学び
The game is voiced throughout in most scenes in Japanese, and I think they've done a really good job. It's a very enjoyable voice cast. Fia is accompanied by her sidekick Carbuncle, Carby. While Carby's vocabulary may seem limited, he plays a crucial role in the events to come.
はい、入学試験を受けに来ました。あのね、言いにくいんだけど。だって案内状には今日だって。今日は入学式よ。
Our very first impression of Fia is as someone perhaps a bit ditzy who gets important dates muddled up. The game, in fact, very deliberately sets you up with one-note stereotype character portraits for the main characters, and then as you work through the events you find out that there is more to the characters than just one comical trait. I wouldn't call it a deep psychological portrait. That's not the purpose of this obviously very light-hearted game. But we certainly do see the characters, especially the students, develop and grow.
ですけど。
まあまあ、細かいことはいいんじゃ。それより入学式に出なさい。君は
合格？試験も受けてないのに？
フィア君は古代魔導学校の
So this is the North American limited edition, and I just want to point out that the game has a rating of E10+. We also, as usual, get a little trading card showing Fia and her sidekick Carbuncle, Carby to his friends, and the back. So it's a nice compact box, not requiring too much storage space. It's a plus for me these days. And Idea Factory also kindly sent along this spoon, a curry spoon. As I understand it, this spoon is a bonus item if you order your limited edition from the Idea Factory online store. So why a curry spoon? Well, that will become obvious once I start talking about the game. I don't know if it comes across on the camera. The spoon has quite a golden sheen to it, and it's got a very petite and very pretty portrait of Fia on the top of the spoon. Okay, so you've seen the introduction to the game, so you've got a bit of an idea what it's about and the whole tone and flavour of it. So let's see if the limited edition matches that vibe. The opening ceremony. And wouldn't you know it, oh yes, something goes spectacularly wrong. Professor Wister is honestly very nice, but he's also very full of himself.
さあ、我が究極のイリュージョンをご覧あれ。
Well, that's an unfortunate effect, but never mind. Carbuncle to the rescue.
うわあ、なんでカー君が食べてるの？しかもいっぱい。こらー！
Now crowd panic over a monster and chaos breaks out.
カー君はカーバンクル、カレー味なのはおばあちゃんの眠気。
Professor Wister seems blissfully unaware of what's going on.
入学式の最中ですよ。黄色い魔物め、スペシャルバーニーサンダー。
Things are spinning out of control.
あ。
また魔物出現。
This is in fact another student called Eska. She is a dragon newt, whatever that may be.
では早速この魔法の実演を。おっとしまった、プヨたちが。
そこのあなた、手伝って。え？プヨが逃げる前に退治よ。
The chaos does not abate. In fact, it gets worse. And there's a reason why I'm showing you this very early scene in such detail. Because this, to me, is the elephant in the room and it needs to be addressed straight away. This is humour applied with a bit of a sledgehammer, I think. And we have to ask, who is this aimed at? Who is the target audience for this game? To me it seems obvious that the target is a younger audience.
それでも
入学式はここまでです。エガルド校長。校長！
はい、寝てません。
And we really need to look at the game in those terms. You can't assess it in the same way as you would a Persona game or even Etrian Odyssey. Now we have the fallout from the opening ceremony chaos. And this is basically the setup for the whole game's raison d'etre. The students obviously desperately want to avoid being expelled, and the game flow progresses via tasks and quests that the students must solve in order to be able to pass exams and hopefully reach the finish line. A note on the graphics. They are kept simple and colourful, which again to me emphasises that they are addressing a younger audience who responds to bright colours and simpler shapes. Personally, I prefer the 2D art over the 3D art in the game, which to me looks just a little bit lifeless and generic. The 2D art really nails the characters and the atmosphere. Graphics quality is in part also, of course, a matter of budget, and this game clearly was on a more restricted budget, as we will also see when we look at the other elements of the game. Student encounters take place in the hallway. The whole experience at the academy is menu-driven with illustrations, basically. So if you were hoping for a Hogwarts-style experience, then no, that's not quite it. Fia is very much a hybrid game with lots of activities you can pursue, similar to some other games that include farming, fishing, mining, cooking, etc. Activities like vegetable and fruit farming are certainly useful because there are certain items for which you need a plentiful supply in the dungeons. Fruit tree maintenance is particularly interesting, and I think they've got an idea here that some farming games could well think about adopting. You could use a lot of your collected items to fertilize the fruit tree, and according to your choices, you will get very different outcomes, so it's actually really fun to experiment with this system. If you have used your fertilizer to encourage certain types of fruit, then you will have a very good harvest. As I said, I think this is a really clever system.
どうしたんだい?
It is worth checking your mail every so often in the library because, especially after completed quests, you will get some extra bonus items. So it's a front opening flap. And first up we have the game. So, the Switch game. But I said earlier on, I'm playing it on the PS5. That was so I could get the jump on the game to be ready with some footage for you guys by the time the box arrived from the United States. The Switch game I wanted to check out because I know there are a lot of you Switch players out there who might be interested in this, and I want to see about performance, because the combat can get quite hectic. Okay, so I'll be checking that out after the unboxing, and we'll do a quick assessment of the Switch version performance towards the end of the video. Just use the timestamps if you need to find particular sections. Next up, the soundtrack. So it is the official soundtrack with 27 tracks. Now, just a quick note about the soundtrack. You will hear a few little bits in the background. I really like it. It matches, I think, the light-hearted mood of the game and is chirpy a lot of the time, but also, and that's always important, it works well as background music, so it doesn't overpower what's happening in the game or on screen. The title song, both title themes, I think are very catchy and quite earwormy. I need to mention the strange case of Eska, the dragon newt girl. She develops a crush on Fia, and true to her nature, she has an overwhelming appetite that manifests as either wanting to eat Fia because she loves her so much, or wanting to be eaten by her. This joke, if you can call it that, is wheeled out at every opportunity. Unless you find this uproariously funny, I think you will tire of it rather soon. I can, however, see children possibly really enjoying this side of the story.
とは夫婦のことだね。要するに
なんですのこの黄色いのは。ゲゲー丸焼きにして私とフィアちゃんの結婚式でみんなに触れまって。
I don't have any knowledge of the Japanese language, so I'm just guessing that this game relies a lot on its Japanese audience's familiarity with the MADO Monogatari series, its characters and their foibles, and parents may be passing down that knowledge and their previous enjoyment of the series to their children now. So I suspect some of the banter may be more obvious and accessible to the Japanese audience, but that is no criticism of the localization. I can't judge it professionally, but it seems to have done a good job to me. Despite the more baffling aspects of Eska's behaviour, I was never left scratching my head wondering what was meant with any particular piece of dialogue. And what do we have here? It is described as a Shikishi board. Super cute, isn't it? Shikishi boards were traditionally, I think, made of Japanese washi paper and then had a hard backing. And this is just a mini one. I think normally they're bigger, and they're used for a variety of decorative purposes like calligraphy or collecting autographs. That's a nice touch. It's just a little extra something that I tend to look for in a limited edition on top of the obligatory soundtrack and art book. The fishing minigame is actually quite decent. There isn't anything particularly complicated about it or very different from what you might have had in other games, but it works well and it kept me busy and entertained, and I certainly did a bit more fishing than I had originally anticipated. What can you do with the caught fish? Well, apart from it occasionally being a sub-quest, you can sell the fish for a decent amount of money, and money is important in this game. You need a fair amount. And I think you can also use it as fertilizer. Oddly enough, I haven't been able to use it in cooking. I'm now in the second half of the game and I have not been given any opportunity to use it in any dishes, which really surprised me. Maybe it'll still happen later on, I don't know, but I would think there's a bit of a missed opportunity for some delicious and stat-boosting dishes. By the way, Idea Factory have details of the people behind the music, the soundtrack, and also the art and design for the game. Details about the creators are available on their website, and I'll put the links in the description below. I always like seeing that, it's only fair that people get credited for their work, and I just think it also shows confidence in the work they're doing and the end product. So, art book, you know me and art books. So the chapters are characters, gallery, design, sketches, short story, and credits. And having just talked about creators and credits, the credits at the end of the book detail the staff and the voice actors. It's of course all voiced in Japanese, and for this level or budget of game, having additionally an English voice acting cast, I'm sure would have been just too expensive. The Japanese cast is excellent. I really enjoyed their performances. And yeah, as long as you're happy reading the subtitles, that really should be no hindrance. So, who am I going to show you first? The most important character, of course. Goo Goo Goo, Carbuncle. And here is Best Girl Fia. It tells us that she wants to graduate and become a great mage. So in just a few words, we have the essentials of what the game is about. It also says Fia, a lucky girl who admires the legendary great mage. And there is a bit of a mystery story embedded in the game about a great mage. My lips are sealed, I won't say anything else. So as I said earlier, it's very much like a slice of life, but there definitely is a story and several sub-stories woven around all the characters. So the important thing I really want to drive home about this game is that while you could probably race through it just playing the dungeons very quickly and not even bothering with side quests, that's entirely possible, you'd be missing the heart of the game. And that is very much the characters and their interactions, the story and the humour. That to me was the heart and soul of the game, and skipping the many cutscenes, you'd be missing out, I would say. So this is Fia's companion and schoolmate Will, whose main aim is to be a great hero. Now that sounds a bit as if all the characters are just one note, but they aren't. You slowly, through the game, learn more about their backgrounds and a bit more complexity is introduced. And Leena, I won't say anything more about her here because I do cover her character a bit in this clip. Leena is the brainy one in the class, the smarty pants. Since she struggles with her social skills, it can be quite amusing to see her interactions with other classmates, and sometimes it gets a bit poignant too.
パーティー組んでほしいんです。うわ、なんでわかった？わかるわよ、普通は。まあ、私を選んだその判断は間違ってないとだけ言っておく。何せ 私は古代魔導学校の歴史始までもね、この私を誘うからにはそれに足るだけのあなた。
Again, I think that these kinds of interactions will strike more of a chord with younger teenagers, perhaps. But I have to say that many of these scenes I actually did enjoy. The concepts are clear and they are well written and, of course, voice acted. Here's a nice example of how a student's personality and the problems they have experienced during childhood can come back in a dungeon to haunt them in the form of a special enemy. That sort of thematic linking is, of course, something that a game like, for instance, Persona 4 excelled at. The dialogue here is a bit clumsy, but it serves its purpose.
これはドアデビル？ワンダ！ダメ。いらない。リーナ。仲間なんていらない。だから友達なんて。やだ。私、ファイヤー！もう
ただいま参上！悪い魔物め。い
いいから早く手伝って。
あ、はい、すみません。
なんで？待って。これは行くよリーナ。パーティーで力を合わせればあんなやつパタンキューなんだから。
So those three characters are the first ones you get to know, and they're the first party of three to start exploring the dungeons. After that, the cast gradually expands. Now, we shouldn't forget about the monsters in the dungeons either. Monsters feature much more in depth in this game than in many other games. They have their own character and personality, and that's something I found really endearing. This is one example of many how enemies get personalised in this game, and the humour the writers have injected into these scenes. And rather than the combat or even the story itself, these were the moments that I really enjoyed the most in the game. Of course, they have to battle Mr. Bones, but after the fight, a surprising revelation.
アイテムじゃなかったのか？
レアアイテムってなんだねそりゃ。学校の食堂で出してるのと
食堂のと同じ？
これでも私は古代魔導学校の職員だからね。
In fact, my secret favourite character is a fish. Oh, yes. Wait till you meet him. My favourite character? Mr. Fish, of course.
Fish! Let's dancing!
Have you ever seen a better fish in a dungeon?
なんで私たち黙って見てるの？
ツッコミを入れるタイミングを見失ってた。
へい、貴様は何者だ？
ファンキーウェーブ！
ファンキーさん、なんで踊って？
いや、スケトウだら。Dancing all night!
Rivan is the students' teacher, like their homeroom teacher, and she's quite a character in her own right. Our first experience in the beginner's dungeon. A greater surprise than fighting Puyos, however, turns out to be our teacher Rivan herself, with aspirations.
それじゃあ始めるわね。塔の中には死の香りが充満していた。
何ですか？
ポエムってやつか。
違うわ、演出よ。
being a dungeon master, like in a Dungeons and Dragons game. Maybe she's thinking of auditioning for Critical Role. I found the complete scene, which is quite lengthy, really funny and enjoyed it.
だから演出なの?
You see here just a brief outline saying completing assignments from teachers and graduating from apprentice will help you become a mage. So she's the one who oversees that process. But once again, telling you very clearly exactly how the game is structured, and that's basically the game flow. Combat is essentially a traditional active time battle system, ATB, which is, as you'll remember from early Final Fantasies, menu-based. That sounds okay, doesn't it? Well, the devil is in the detail. Let's look at the basic tutorial, which I think is really well presented, especially for younger players who might not be familiar with this kind of combat system. Indeed, enemies are very eager to attack. They don't just hang around waiting for you. This contributes to the pace of the combat, which I will show you in a dungeon in a moment. This is a nice little touch, the facial expressions. However, I don't think you'll have enough time to check those in detail while you're fighting. The vocabulary is kid-friendly. Being hit is called ouchies, and 0 HP is called ouchied. Puyos have this way of jumping and bouncing off you. It's actually pretty hard to avoid. You'd have to run around an awful lot, and that would make lining up your shots, especially at range, more difficult. Our first experience in the beginner's dungeon. For each main quest, and some of the side quests as well, you need to traverse a dungeon's levels, usually from 1 to 10, but later on that can get more. Traverse them several times, just for each quest. It says they are randomly generated, but after so many times of traversing the same dungeon levels, I began to recognize layouts. It felt like there was a blueprint for floors, and they were just slightly adjusted and shuffled around, and items and loot are randomized. All this means that floor fatigue can set in quite early on, unfortunately. There is simply too much repetition. You know, I am not averse to grinding if it is fun, but this is where this game falls down a bit for me. The combat system isn't bad, but it isn't quite good enough to make it enjoyable for such extended, repetitive dungeon visits. That is, for me, the core problem with this game. The pacing for the game feels too slow, and all the various side activities don't really help to ameliorate that basic sense of time being stretched too thin. I would have been a lot happier if they had cut the game's time in half and accordingly compressed progression much more. That would have given it a lot of zip, which the game is sort of lacking. This is an example of how fast and hectic combat can become, even in the early chapters. You can only ever play as Fia, but your support party members have actually good AI support skills, which you can fine-tune in a tactics menu. This often frenetic combat, to my mind, would be well suited to having a couch co-op option. I think that would have made dungeon visits a lot more enticing, especially for the younger players. In Chapter 3, we have to deal with an owl bear. The pace of the enemy attacks and combat in general is not really that well suited, I think, to a menu-based approach. I felt I had to spend too much time digging through the basic menu, and having the extra option of a shortcuts menu, it doesn't really alleviate the problem. It feels to me like an out-and-out hack-and-slash action combat approach might have been the better choice. A bit maybe like they do it in the East games. Alternatively, if they wanted to stick with a more measured approach of picking from a menu, etc., the pace of the combat would need to be completely rebalanced. So I think they really got stuck between trying to combine two approaches, fast real-time combat and menu-based timeline approach, ATB. And in the end, that makes for a not entirely satisfying combat system. At least that's how it comes across to me. Equipment isn't really that specific for each class. Fia in particular can assume almost any role and therefore equip any type of weapon. The other team members have their own specific weapon, but apart from that, much of the gear is shared between the members. You can synthesize more advanced gear, and you certainly need to do that, but it takes quite a while until you're able to get the required materials. There are two items that can help you significantly cut down the time for clearing the dungeon floor levels again and again. The Idatan herb gives you roadrunner speed, and floor dousing reveals the complete floor to you, so you don't have to guess where the next floor portal might be. You need to top up your vitality as you move through the dungeon, and that is easily done with curry, which, to save money, you should be cooking yourself, and sometimes it's also a lucky drop item. The difficulty of all these mechanics is mitigated because the dungeons are absolutely stuffed to the gills with useful items, including little balls that will top up your HP, MP and vitality by small amounts. The ease and simplicity of the whole system is also underscored by the skills, most of which, as you progress, you share with your team members. The dungeons themselves are, however, increasingly spiked with traps and obstacles of all kinds and varieties. The guillotine blades. There's a box cunningly placed, and I got to sneak through on that side without falling off. Yes, I once fell off one of those open sides, and it's start the floor all over again. In this boss fight with the owl bear, I think you can see how there's visually an awful lot going on, especially with fire explosions. But Will is finally able to launch one of his great magic arts. Maybe I'm just bad at triggering them. Look how I'm running away from owl bear. And I haven't found those special arts to be available as much as I would like, I suppose. Maybe I just got to get better at this. We made it by the skin of our teeth. And as you can see, the dungeons are getting bigger. We've now got 15 floors, and that's only chapter 3. This promotion exam is as far as I'm going in my coverage this time. This is definitely a tougher fight, with Professor Roy obviously quite strong, and he's got a Devil's Door for his support as well as a Ghosty and a Skeleton, so not to be sneezed at. I put the shield skill on Fia, and honestly it's a bit of a lifesaver in these situations. As you can see, things sometimes become a bit messy and hectic, and I tend to stick to the reliable basics in these types of fights. Targeting your skills most efficiently is an art form I have never really excelled at, but hey, I do my best. There is a very user-friendly save system on each floor. I found the differences between the 3 difficulty levels not to be that great. So picking either normal or hard should be just fine. Here is an example of a floor that presents a mild puzzle. I found that taking the Dutton herb for speed made getting through those obstacles a lot easier. I had mentioned how the side quests from the request board are, in my opinion, strictly optional, and most of the rewards are hardly worth bothering with. At least early on. It does get a bit better after chapter 3. But what's actually quite fun is those very short, you can hardly call them side quests, let's call them excursions. Sometimes there's a little story that goes over several of these incidents, and they can be entertaining. There's a lot more that could be said, of course, about all the different game mechanics, but I'll leave it at this for the time being. No, I didn't use this dungeon synthesis box much at all. You'd have to cart a stack of materials about. You don't have room for that in your bag. Overall, I'd say the combat and side activities are beginner-friendly. The game is suitable for families and especially for players aged around 10 and upwards. The story and characters are fashioned to suit this audience and are, on the whole, engaging, if not overly complex. There are some drawbacks, such as repetitive dungeon visits and slow progression. The game has buckets of charm, however I don't think that serious dungeon crawlers who love difficulty and high complexity are the intended audience for Fia and the Wondrous Academy. Now, I hope you'll agree with me that I think the 2D art is really delectable, really nice and appealing. At the back of the book we have designed sketches. So I'm not showing you too much from the art book, and the publisher also pointed out that there are potential spoilers in some of the sections, so I'm being careful. And we have a special short story, 2 pages, near the end of the book, a story of young Fia and her grandma. And her grandma is quite important for understanding Fia's background. That's nice to have. 64 pages in total, the usual well-produced hardback art book from Idea Factory. Really nice design and layout. Quality is really good. And there you have it. One limited edition for MADO MONOGATARI Fia and the Wondrous Academy. I'd be very surprised if that game doesn't put a lot of smiles on a lot of faces. I started the game in handheld mode, quickly trying to skip through the many cutscenes in the first chapter. The skip function is in fact more of a fast-forward function. The visuals look very nice in handheld, and the really important thing is that the design of the game suits both the large screen as well as the smaller handheld screen. Even smaller menus are easily readable. There is a snag with the performance though. This is a loading screen between 2 scenes. The age and specs of the Switch are taking a toll here. Lots of cutscenes in the first chapter make this a bit more noticeable. The good news is that the loading screens between floor levels and dungeons are very brief, just a second or so. I don't have testing software, but the file properties for my recorded clips told me that the frame rate fluctuated quite a bit, usually between 25 and 30 FPS, which is as expected. However, occasionally it dipped down as low as 15, which surprised me. I have to stress, though, that in the dungeons while combating, I did not notice any stuttering or freezing or anything like that. Time didn't allow me to play much beyond the first chapter, unfortunately, but I don't have any specific reason to assume that would suffer noticeably in performance later on. Since the short handheld 10-second clips of purely combat were always at a rock-solid 30 frames per second. The files affected by a lower frame rate were ones with ample cutscene-style animation. Overall, I enjoyed my time playing in handheld mode, and I think the game's mechanics and style are particularly well suited to the handheld experience. Let's look at docked mode now. Playing in docked mode, the difference is immediately apparent. The graphics look really good, closer to the PlayStation, I would say. Performance feels more fluid, again more akin to what the PlayStation offers. No surprise then to see that the file properties show 60 frames per second. Now, whether that is held throughout all the time, I cannot say, of course, but I think it is significant that docked mode seems to be quite a step up from handheld performance. Here's the loading screen between floors, about 2 seconds. Getting through the beginner's dungeon is a bit tedious, as I mentioned before. We have now advanced to having 3 Puyos to fight instead of just 2. Fortunately, it's all very quick and smooth flowing, and victory comes in a trice. If you gain new skills in a dungeon, it's important to keep up with equipping them, because the enemies sure aren't getting any weaker.
Fia, 後ろだ!
This is a mini-boss to finish up your assignment, and I usually find that while I stand around trying to find some healing potion, Fia being the only one who can use items, my team members have already finished off the job.
なんだか扱いやすくなったわ。役よ、ローズ。
This is one of my favourite scenes, so I'll show it to you. Toto completely outplays the very strict Vice Principal Rosemary with his extensive knowledge of Academy regulations.
判断の方がいい。僕たちは魔物がローズマリー先生。それは僕が連絡しておきました。ダンジョン探索規則には緊急時は速やかに確
かに緊急時の特別規則に沿って行動していいでしょう。不合格は取り消します。つまり合格ってことだね。
To finish off, beware of Momono. This guy is a rip-off trader. His prices are through the roof. However, he does have the odd crucial item that you can get only from him, especially in the beginning. Just stick as much as possible to the general store run by Vice Principal Rosemary. For special items, don't forget to check your mail. Iduten herb is valuable early in the game. My final item tip, visit the principal's office regularly. You never know what might be lurking in that vase. Floor dousing, brilliant. Why not pet Uri and Boo while you're in the classroom? I don't know yet whether this has any effect, but one should always pet small animals. As always, thank you for your time. Please keep well. I'm Food for Dogs. Bye-bye.
頑張って合格してすっごい大魔導士になるんだ。
広い魔物め、この勇者ウィルが退治してやる。
何せ私は古代魔導学校の歴史始まって以来の最高成績で入学試験を突破した天才なのだから。
パーティーの仲間が欲しかったんでしょ。君と一緒なら僕も儲かりそうだ。
この程度全然大したことありませんわ。だって私はあの子に弾むところへ惑わして何度もあんな